A to the K.
To the K.
To the K.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to the A to the K Wrestling Show, where today we are joined by a former WWE Divas champion, where we knew her as Kaitlyn. Now she is health and wellness coach and creator of the Body Alchemy method, the one and only Celeste Bonin. Celeste, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I like have pyro also. I'm like, I still have a part of the WWE. Thank you for the intro. Super excited to be here to chat today. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, thanks so much for being here. I kind of wanted to start at the beginning. So obviously you've always had a passion for fitness and, competing in bodybuilding and fitness competitions. How did your kind of love for the whole fitness world lead you to a WWE tryout at just 23 years old?
It's a great question. I like the way you formatted it because it's so intricately tied. I grew up playing sports and was very, very into strong, powerful women. And I had a track coach who mentored me in a lot of ways outside of just track. And she was a fitness competitor. And I had never seen, this was like, I feel like it was before MySpace times, like before, social media really existed in the way that it does now. So there wasn't a lot of access to see these different types of, particularly women that had a lot of muscle, were, really in shape, really powerful. And so I was so enthralled by her, and she took me under her wing. She taught me how to train at just 14 years old. I learned a lot from her, and it led me to want to compete on stage and competitive bodybuilding. So when I graduated high school, I was 18, and I started doing my first ever contest prep, like a bodybuilding preparation to do a show. And I stepped on stage for the first time at age 19. And I loved the whole process. I loved the transformation of my body. I loved the discipline of it, how much I learned throughout, the entire start to finish. And I continued on doing more fitness shows and learning different styles of training and learning what works best for my body. And I had some success. Early on, but I found that, being up there on stage for a fleeting moment, it was all worth it. The journey was worth it, but it wasn't really like that feeling that I was looking to have. It felt like a very static version of who I am, and I wanted it to be more dynamic. And so I had planned on stepping into, at that time when I first started competing, I was just doing figure. And so the figure posing is very simple. There's no real theatrics in it. It's not like you don't have like a posing routine, or at least you didn't back in the day. And so I was stepping in to do women's bodybuilding at the time that I had the opportunity to try out for WWE. So I was so excited about the opportunity to be able to try out, to at least even just try out, because I was already in the pursuit of something beyond what I was doing already. I wanted to perform. I wanted to be on the stage. I wanted that feeling as a child, and I still feel this way. And I feel like there's no other way to say it other than I've always felt like a star. Like I've always felt like very alive, performing or showcasing my hard work, or pieces of who I am. And I got this opportunity to try out, and it felt like everything I had been working for had started to culminate in that moment where I was like, oh my gosh, it's real. So it was pretty cool, just even the opportunity to be able to try out.
Yeah, definitely. And, you talk about kind of having that, the performance side of things and all eyes of you. Like literally as soon as you got signed, it felt almost like straight away you were part of NXT. Like, what a whirlwind that must have been. What was kind of going through your mind when you found out you'd be debuting so quickly?
I don't actually remember like the time frame of when I got, I did the tryout, I got hired, and that all happened really fast. I moved from Houston to Tampa, where the developmental center was at that time. And I can't remember, but it was a number of weeks. It was weeks that I had been there before I got that call that I was going to be like a, last minute replacement on NXT. And so the first reaction that just came out of me was tears. I just cried when I got the phone call because it was just so much emotion, so much excitement. I was also terrified I was just like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I don't know the first thing about wrestling. Like I just got here. I had never wrestled a match, didn't even have a pair of wrestling boots. Like, and so it was a lot all at once. It was very, very overwhelming. But at the same time, I had this feeling of like, this is what I signed up for. Like, this is what I wanted. It's just happening at an extremely accelerated rate. And so at that moment in time, to me, there wasn't an option. Like to me to say, no, I don't want to do it or I'm not ready wasn't an option. I was just like, okay, this is the opportunity. Like this is the moment where you decide to just go for it. And I felt that I used to say this a lot, doing interviews or talking about that time in my life. But I used to say, I had nothing to lose, which is true in some ways, but I also had everything to lose in that moment. I think that that's why there was so much emotion involved. So yeah, it was just like, I felt so incredibly lucky and blessed to be at that right spot, the right time. But I also knew how much I had worked on my physique, on my discipline, on trying to access who I am and what that means and what that looks like. That trying to pull from this feeling that I've always had as a child and growing up in terms of like what's possible for my life. So it was like all that happened in one moment. But I was, that was like kind of that first reaction. And then I, of course, like as the day went on and I think I got the call on a Friday and I debuted on a Tuesday. So it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So in that time, I had a lot of time to think. I had a lot of time to like, freak out in my head and think about all the things that could go wrong. And then I also had a lot of time to be like, oh my God, what if this happened? And what if this happened? So it was just like such this insane spectrum of emotions. And that up until that point, that was probably like the biggest thing that had ever happened to me in my life. So I didn't, and I think this is true for most 23-year-olds, you don't have a lot of experience with emotions like that. You don't have a lot of experience with how to manage something so that requires so much capacity to process and realize and to maintain. So that was, and I say this a lot about this time frame in my life, not just that specific like big moment where I realized it was all going to happen. But the whole entire time I was in WWE, especially in the beginning, was incredibly defining for me as a person, my character, my values, who I am. And when I say character, I don't mean on TV. I mean who I am as a person, like really developing characteristics of like who I want to be in life. And I always attribute so much of who I am today to that very transformational time frame, like for, a little under 4 years of just so much opportunity, so so much like bigness, so much energy.
A lot.
Yeah.
Literally growing up in front of the world, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the time you did spend on NXT was kind of more doing various challenges and things like that. Like, were you grateful at the fact, because obviously it was such a quick turnaround, that it was more kind of challenge based as opposed to kind of trying to showcase your wrestling ability? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
For sure. I definitely felt like because it was a variety of the things that we were competing in, some of the stuff was very athletic based. Some of the stuff was trivia and knowledge about wrestling in the industry, which I had very, very little knowledge because I wasn't like this super diehard fan growing up. Like I watched wrestling here and there with my brother. Like I had a couple of favorite wrestlers, but I didn't know the history. I didn't know the culture. I didn't know so many aspects of it. And it made me feel very much like an outsider. And in those moments, I tended to be super hard on myself for not knowing a lot of these things. Because it amplified the feeling that would sometimes arise within me that I didn't even deserve to be there. That was like one of the negative thought patterns that I had a lot of the time, is like, even though I know how hard I worked to even get in that position, to have the ability to receive the opportunity to do it. I know how hard I had worked to get there. And then how hard I was working behind the scenes to even just continue to show up for the show as it was happening. But I think, some of the things I faced backstage and in the locker room and stuff was the whole concept. And I feel like it's very old school, but I get it, that I didn't earn it. Like I didn't, I didn't deserve to be there because I wasn't so immersed in the world of professional wrestling my whole life. And so that was something I wrestled with a lot within myself. And ultimately, like, it always came back to, yes, I deserve to be here. Like, I did receive an amazing blessing and opportunity at that time, but like, I have been preparing my whole life for this. I just didn't know what it was,
Yeah.
but I like, so
Yeah.
that's kind of
No,
how
it
I
must have been.
justified it sometimes.
Yeah, it must have been really difficult, obviously, especially as you say, like the locker room at the time and things like that. Obviously, those challenges, some of them you did win, like the physical challenge set in the time, obviously, which you showed all the effort you put in there. Another one that you did win was the talent competition with the drawing of Vickie. Now, obviously, looking back on that, like she seemed to almost like break character. Did she know that you were going to draw her? Was this already planned, or was this like a
She
live reaction?
she did. I don't think that she knew, like, she knew I was dressed as her. Like, she knew that that was going to be, dressing as her, but I don't
Yeah.
think that she knew about the drawing. Like, that was so funny. That was so, like, Vickie, I always did, even though I didn't know a lot about her at that time, but I always did have so much respect for her, just who she is and how she, the mark that she made while she was there, and just like how much crazy heat she had, and like, it was just so cool to be around her and to experience like her wisdom and her knowledge. And so her and I had such a great relationship, and I was so grateful to have that dynamic on the show, because it protected me and it also built me up in a lot of ways, because she had so much heat. She was this anytime she'd even grab the microphone, like, people were booing, like, it was crazy. And I got to experience being on the other end of that as like the baby face, or the person that was kind of receiving the brunt of her attitude and the way that she treated me. And so I became so grateful for that dynamic, because it gave me the opportunity to really step up. And it was this like ultimate underdog story. And so we had such a deep bond, and I had so much gratitude for her, because she really did uh mentor me. She really did guide me. And I know that was the premise of the show, having, a pro and the rookie. And that wasn't just like a thing for TV, for me at least. Like, she really, really helped me more in terms of the emotional aspect, that the other intangible parts besides wrestling, like how to understand things, how to play with the dynamics that were happening, both on screen and behind the scenes. So that was it's so funny to watch that back, because it, like, yeah, you can tell the moment where she, like, she really wants to laugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, it's hard to remember, but I'm pretty sure she did not know that I was going to draw her, which was so funny. So funny.
Yeah, that's totally. Like watching it back, you could just see. I was like, I'm pretty sure she didn't know this was coming. I mean, typical Whirlwind fashion for you. Like, you go on to win NXT, and then the next, like, how long was it then before you're on like Smackdown and things like that? What was? I know we kind of touched briefly on like the transition into the locker room, and kind of obviously the difficulty of being like an outsider and stuff like that. But what was that transition like? Again, another kind of NXT, now you're on SmackDown.
It was interesting. So it was very layered, because I won NXT, and of course, like, I got a spot on SmackDown. But there was this weird dynamic, because, and it wasn't a secret, like, I didn't have experience. I don't know how to work. Like, I didn't, and I had learned, of course, as much as I could in that time period that NXT aired. And I was going in between TVs, I was going back to FCW and training in the ring and trying to learn, but I just didn't have that much experience. So I never really got like this big debut as like a new character, like the winner of NXT. I was just kind of like protected and hidden behind the scenes. And then over time, it was very difficult for me mentally and emotionally um, to feel like I was ever going to really get a chance. Like, I kind of just thought that, the whole NXT thing was super cool. I got the spot on the roster, but I almost felt like a little bit just kind of like not forgotten, but like I needed, uh, I was always looking for an opportunity. I was writing story ideas, trying to get on the show, create, just trying to prove myself, essentially. Here I am, like, trying to prove myself on NXT. And I think I was, more so trying to prove it to myself versus everybody
Yeah.
else. And so I just struggled a lot with confidence. I struggled a lot with, like, showing up at TVs, because I'm like, it's just going to be, a disappointment. I'm going to get there. I'm not going to be on the show. They're not going to like any of the things I wrote as pitches or story ideas. I'm going to have to deal with like, the dynamics in the locker room that didn't feel that good. And so it was very difficult to continue to show up. And at a certain point, and I'm sure most people can relate to this, when you're in a setting or an experience that is mentally, emotionally, and physically challenging, it's hard to continue to show up with like a bright, positive attitude of hope, like and so I really, really struggled a lot internally with that. And then even though I wasn't on the show, like I wasn't booked in matches and promos and stuff, I was still going to all the TVs, and I was working the live events, like the non-televised stuff. And that's actually where I learned to wrestle. That's where I got most of my experience. And even though like those were way more fun because you didn't have to worry about cameras and the times that much. And, it was just more fun and more relaxed. So I was able to just like breathe a little bit and actually learn and actually be present and actually develop myself as a in-ring performer during all of that. But it was all behind the scenes, so I was like working my ass off and so it was a very difficult time. It was a very, very difficult time. And there's my brother, I have one brother, and he and I are super, super close. And now, if I wish I could have the text messages, but I felt like he was like the only person that I could talk to, because like not a lot of people understood the position I was in. Like it was this amazing, incredible, unbelievable opportunity, but I was struggling so much inside to be like, is this, just with showing up and trying to be positive and like, I used to have these messages with my brother where I'd be like, I think I'm going to quit. Like, I don't want to be here next week. Like, cause it was just so difficult. And I just didn't, like I said, like I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself that I was ever going to be, considered one of the divas in the way that the other women were. I had some self-esteem issues. I felt like I didn't look like everybody else. And because the travel was so difficult, yeah, I wasn't on TV, but I was still doing all the loops, 4 or 5 days every single week. And so that caught up with me too. Just, I wasn't, the sleep schedule is really hard. It's really hard to eat in a healthy way. And it's just like a lot emotionally. And I had so much like cortisol and stress pumping through my body all the time. And so I forgot where I was going with that, but I can't remember. It'll come back to me. But the in general, like, I didn't know how long I could continue to go on like that with how I was feeling, my own perception of myself, how it felt being backstage. And so I just questioned everything for a really long time. And my brother would always encourage me. He's like, dude, like, he would remind me of who I am. He would remind me of like everything that like I had worked for, even to get to that point. And it helped me so much, so many times. But he really was the only person I felt like I could talk to, because this is where I was going with this. Because from the outside looking in, it was so incredible. And it was just, but it was like so cool. Like, he made it to WWE, like you're traveling the world, doing this cool stuff. And that was all very valid and true, but I just didn't know how to switch that on the inside. I didn't know how to like turn on this part of myself that would help me believe or see something in a different way or show up in a different way, or just even have that possibility of hope that the next day that I go to TV is going to be my big break or my big opportunity to create myself as a character on SmackDown versus just trying to get on the show in any way possible.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you said before around like not even having like the life experience, being so young, and then being thrust into the deep end of a brand new kind of world. Like I can't imagine how overwhelming and daunting that must have been for you. But you kind of mentioned, obviously you were a last minute replacement for NXT. So there was another kind of moment in your career where, obviously I've got to talk about the Battle Royal. So, the controversial Battle Royal, where were you meant to win? Was Eve meant to win? But regardless of that, what was what was the backstage reaction to that? And do you think you would have ever ended up getting the Divas title opportunity if it wasn't for that kind of monumental moment?
That's a great question. No one's ever actually asked me that follow-up question in terms of like the whole battle royal thing. But so, I mean, it all really ties into what we're talking about. I had, when I had first gotten put on the road in the very beginning of NXT, Finlay was still there. Finlay was there, and he was the Divas agent. Like he was our producer. He was the one that could really help us put together matches and make them make sense and help each other, shine and look amazing. Even though we only had sometimes 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, it was still a time where we're really fighting for TV time. And he had helped me so much early on because he knew the position that I was in. I was in a very vulnerable position, not only to like potentially get hurt in the ring or accidentally hurt somebody else, but just like not having any knowledge or awareness in this whole new world that I was in. So he helped me a lot. And I respected him so much because like I saw how he worked with the women. Like I just, and his vision, and really liked him. And there was a period of time where he left the company for like a year. And, all the girls really struggled in that time because we were going through, essentially the company was trying to find who was going to be the next women's agent. And we went through multiple people and it was just a struggle. It was so hard. And at that time, and this is never something that I agreed with, but it was just the culture at the time. It was so cutthroat. And it wasn't like, hey, a rising tide raises all ships. Let's help each other, grow, and let's grow this division and show them really what we can do. But it was so cutthroat. Anybody that had an opportunity, it would get sabotaged some way, or people would try to tear that person down instead of saying, hey, let's elevate each other one at a time. And so, so it was just difficult. It was difficult. And so we had this battle royal. I didn't know okay. So we had the battle royal. We had the card for it. We knew it was going to happen. And whoever had whatever agent we had when we were initially putting the battle royal together, like the actual match, I was going to be like eliminated like twice or the second or something like that. I was still so low on the totem pole. I was going to be like maybe the second or third elimination. So, in there for just a couple seconds, then boom, I'm out. That's it. And so it was really close to doors opening. I remember this. And I was hanging outside Gorilla. And Finlay like walks up, and I hadn't seen him in a year. And I was like, oh my God. And he gives me a hug. He gives me a hug and he's like, why aren't you on TV yet? And I was just like, I don't know, because it was like the realest question ever. And I was just like, I don't know. Like, is it me? Like, I don't know. And so he looks at the card or whatever, like the kind of the recipe for the match. And he either tore it up or he scribbled it or something. And he completely rewrote the story of the Battle Royal. And he had told me, he's like, you have a storyline with Eve, right? Because leading up to that, like the few weeks leading up to Fit's return, I had been like feverishly writing storylines, and I was like trying to get the spot as the assistant general manager on Smackdown. Like that was like the way I was trying to write myself into that position, and I was getting some headway. And creative liked to the story, and so Eve and I were getting to do some backstage stuff, and she was a heel at the time, and we had worked up to a match, and I had written this whole thing. I had written this storyline, and the day that we were going to have the match for who was actually going to get the assistant GM spot, I was supposed to win. I was supposed to get the spot, and then Vince changed his mind hours before the match, and I ended up losing, and they gave the spot to Eve, and I was so just torn down by that, because I was like, I wrote this whole story, like and I was like, this was finally my moment. But ended up being this really amazing blessing, because I had gotten myself in this story with Eve over a few weeks on television, and Finley's looking at me. He's like, you have a storyline with Eve right now. And I was like, I do. And he was like, okay, you're going to be in there last with Eve. And so that's literally how that decision was made. And it was just like, I was like, oh my God. And like all the things that were running through my head were like, oh my God, everyone's going to hate me. Like everyone's going to be mad at me. And I was like, can I do this? Like, oh, like everything. And it was almost like a mini version of that first call when I got told I was going to come up on NXT. It was like a similar feeling, like, oh, like questioning myself, but also super excited and be like, oh my God, it's like only a couple hours from now until the match happened. And it was live on Raw. And I don't think at that point I had been a part of a really big match like that yet, or had any significant role in a big match like that. And so there was just like so many things running through my head, so many things running through my body. But I will tell you, one of the biggest things that I was afraid of is like how the locker room is going to react to that. What the attitude was going to be, how many people were going to try to get me written out of it, and all these things. Yeah. And so the way the story was supposed to be told is that I think it was Layla was the champ at the time, and
Hmm.
Eve was going to have a title run. She's gonna have a title run. She was gonna work with Layla for the title, and I was so happy to be in this new position. I was like, oh my God, this is at that point that was going to be the most significant moment of my career, aside from winning NXT. Like that was going to be it. And yeah, so and I just have to say, I love Eve, and I have always loved Eve, and she is a wonderful, amazing, beautiful, brilliant woman, and she has a lot of integrity, and she's just good people, and I have always felt like that about her. Um, and she was down, like she's like, all right, like, and we put it together, and we both knew the story and how the match was going to end, and the spot got messed up, like, or it didn't even get messed up. The spot was where I was going to clothesline her over. She's going to hang on and then just pull me out, like really simple. And
Hmm.
I don't know if it was like the momentum or something was off. And I went to clothesline her over the top rope, and the timing, I think it was the timing, or I didn't hit her hard enough, or a combination of a bunch of things, and she didn't flip over. So we had to set the spot back up. And
Hmm.
I was sure as hell not gonna let that happen again. So I clotheslined her super hard. So, I was always safe in the ring. But I was like, this can't happen. Like this is a huge moment, and I hit her so hard she couldn't hang on. She fell off. And it was like it took me a second to register what had happened, and like her feet hitting the ground, what that actually meant. And so that was like one realization. And then like the second realization was like, oh my God, this is on live TV. Like that was the second one. And the third one is like, oh my God, what is going to happen? And then in that moment, I think it was Brad Maddox, and that was the first time he had ever refed anything live on Raw. So he's got Vince in his ear, and they're telling him to tell me to celebrate. So he grabs my hand, and like you can see it. You can watch it. You can see pictures. Like it's truly like the surprise of a lifetime. Like I had all of this had happened, and it was just like, he was like, "Oh my God," because he knew that was in the finish, and I was like, "Oh my God," and so the I think we went to a commercial or something. The lights go out, and at that point, like, I was trying to process everything that happened, and I was like, "Am I going to get fired? Like, I think people get fired for stuff like this, or like, what's going to happen, or like, how's the women's locker room going to react?" And so it was like so many things all at once, and I was so afraid to walk back through Gorilla because I feel like there's so many times where. And I know it's not just me, where people were like, Vince could react anyway to this. And it just probably depends on his mood or what's happening or how the show's going or whatever. And I remember being really afraid to go back through the curtain. And so I walked really slow. It was like the house was dark because it was during commercial. And when I got back to through Gorilla, Vince was laughing. Vince was laughing his ass off. Like he was laughing. Eve was crying, which I understand. It was very understandable. Our writer at the time was standing there waiting to give me a huge hug. And he's like, congratulations. Like he was like embracing it. And there was like so many people. Like it was a vibe. Like it was cool to go back there and grill it because it was like this crazy thing nobody expected, and it's whatever, nothing bad happened, nobody got hurt, and of course I understand why Eve was upset. And then as I'm going leaving Gorilla, there's a lot of like my homies, like people that I was really cool with, that knew how hard I was working and how much I was struggling, that were just like gave me the biggest hug, and they were like, I'm so happy for you. Cause like they knew, it's like that is one of those like once in a lifetime things to just like shift somebody into the perfect position. And it was just like so much a process. And I was like, does this mean I get a title run? Like there were so many questions because of course that outcome changed a lot of what was going to be happening with the show. And yeah, it stuck. And so that it's funny, like these two very significant moments in my life or in my WWE career happened in a moment of like shock and like, oh my God. And then I eventually, figured it out as one does. But it was like a theme for me in terms of like advancing in my career with the company.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you do go on to win the women's world title in your hometown, and then you do leave WWE. What was kind of the thought process behind leaving?
So when I got the opportunity to do the title run and then got the title, and I mean, obviously, like I'm fast forwarding because the run for the title was incredible. It was amazing. Like, and again, like Eve was such an incredible mentor and person to, um, you know, hand me the title, and so it was incredible. And my title run was okay. It wasn't anything, to write home about. It was really cool to have the title. And then, Total Divas happened. And I had that really cool storyline with AJ. But as all of that was transpiring, I was realizing that getting the title, which to me was the absolute pinnacle for so long, like if I could just get the title, that was supposed to be the thing. That was supposed to make me feel the way I wanted to feel. It was supposed to validate all the things that I, questioned about myself. And when I got the title, it was, I won the title on the 20th anniversary of Raw in my hometown as a babyface. Like insane, insane. But it didn't fulfill this part that I was hoping. It didn't fulfill this feeling that I was searching for since before, since my bodybuilding days. And I was kind of slowly coming to that realization. So I was having I was just struggling again, emotionally. I was struggling with purpose, with meaning, with like, if gaining the title did not fulfill me in the way that I had hoped, like, it was just it was depressing in a way. And because I was going through that turmoil, I was gaining a lot of weight and I was just very emotionally imbalanced. And it showed in my appearance. It showed in the way that I, showed up at work and the way I looked in the ring. And so it was kind of everything at once, like all of the excitement, all of the opportunity that happened from the very beginning with NXT all kind of just came crashing down. Like all of it kind of just came to a head and I just didn't know how to manage it. I didn't know how to process my emotions. I didn't have anybody to talk to that I trusted. I didn't know how to talk about it. And I was very, very alone. I felt very lonely. I was going through relationship issues. And so I asked for my release because I didn't want to get fired. I didn't want to go down that route. I wanted to just say, okay, I'm going to do this on my own terms. Like, what's next in life? So yeah, it was super difficult, but I also was like, I did so much cool stuff while I was here. Like I did so much cool stuff. Like, the whole feud with AJ was like a dream. Like it was so fun. And it was some of the things that we got to do were so cool. Like just so cool. So I also felt that too. I was like, I've done some really cool stuff. This lifestyle is very hard. This is definitely not something I want to do for the rest of my life. I could definitely acknowledge that. But yeah, I was just like, let me just leave because I didn't think that there was anything else for me there with the state of mind that I was in.
So yeah, we did get to see you come back as part of the Mae Young Classic. What was it like, kind of coming back after that time away?
The Mae Young Classic was super cool. It was super cool. Because at that point, it had been 4 years since I left. I went through a lot. I got married, I got divorced. I went through a lot of life stuff. And so I was excited to go back for a temporary amount of time. It wasn't like this huge commitment of going on the road and living on the road and all the things that come with that. I had a business at the time, a different business than I have now, a clothing business. And I was just like, I felt that I was this new person. I had a new perspective, new mentality. I was more emotionally resilient. I knew more of myself. Like I had more confidence in just how I carried myself in life. And of course, that translates to, how one carries themselves in the ring, so I was excited to go back. Not that I felt like I needed to prove anything, but I didn't like the way that I left. When I left, I had asked for my release and it was, I think it was like an old school Raw. And I had like a really difficult day, a travel day getting to TV, and it was just like a nightmare. And then it was in Baltimore, it was snowing, and there was all these delays, and it was just like the worst. And when I got there, I wasn't booked. And I was just like, it was just like didn't feel good. And I'm just like, what am I doing? You know, I had already been ruminating and thinking about leaving and what if, you know, not wanting to get fired and stuff. And because it was the beginning of the year, WrestleMania was coming up. And so it just it just made sense to ask for my release. Talent relations told me to sleep on it, like, you know, make sure this is what you want to do. And so I went to TV the next day. So it was Baltimore. And I think TV the next day was in Philly. And I wasn't on Raw or SmackDown, but I was on, I don't know if WWE still has main event, but I was on the main event show and I had a match with
Mhm.
AJ as my last match. And I was so physically sick that day. Like I was so sick to my stomach. I felt so stressed out. Like I didn't know if it was like, I knew a part of me knew it was the right decision to leave because I didn't want to be there anymore because of all the things I was dealing with. Um, and I didn't feel like I could handle it for that much longer. So I knew leaving at that time was going to be the right decision for me then, but I just felt sick about it and I didn't tell anybody. Like I didn't tell anybody that I asked for my release until there was like people eventually started finding out like in the office and then some of the wrestlers found out, but I didn't even tell the people that I was closest to until I asked for my release. And then of course AJ knew because you know we had my last match. We wrestled on main event, but I was just so sick to my stomach all day, and I didn't like leaving that way. Like I didn't. It wasn't on a high note. I think the last thing I ever received was like a super kick from Tamina in the face. You know, after the match, and it was a part of the story, but. I was all that to say, I was just glad to go back in a different way to have evolved and come so far in terms of like my development as a person. And so it just felt really good. And you know, Beth Phoenix was on commentary, Renee, who I love, Michael Cole was on commentary, and it was just like this opportunity to like, vibe with these people that I never was super vibey with Michael Cole, but it was cool I respect him. So it was cool to interact with him. And I had this opportunity to go into a room and talk to all three of them before they did the commentary or before the classic even started to share about my life now, you know, what I wanted them to talk about, like how they can share about my life and stuff. And it felt really good. And then I had some great matches. My first one was I can't remember her name, but it was a great match, you know. And then my second match I loved with Mia Yim. And Mia had been following me for a long time and she had been supporting my clothing line. So she would, you know, buy the stuff that I was making and selling and she would wear it and promote it on social media. And she was just dope. And so I was really excited to, number one, meet her in person, number two, wrestle her. And we had never worked together and we had the most amazing chemistry. You know, she's just like a down ass person and it was so cool. So it was a great experience. It was a really great experience.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, WWE does have this little event called the Royal Rumble. If they ever give you the call, would you go back one more time?
I like it depends. Like I'm always down to do something cool. You know, if it's like cool and
Yeah.
fun and it like makes sense, like I'm always down for that. And there like I had gone to a Royal Rumble a couple of years ago where there was like a possibility that I was going to be in it and it ended up not unfolding, but I'm like, you know, I have a whole different life now. But it's WWE is such a big part of who I am. So like I'm
Mhm.
always down for stuff that makes sense. I'm always down for stuff that's really cool. And it just, you know, hasn't really unfolded that way yet. But yeah, I'm always open to opportunity for something to cross over or, you know, to make sense again. Always open for that.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure everybody would love to see it if that happens. But so you mentioned, obviously, you know, you're on a very different kind of path now in your time away. You've become a health and wellness coach and you've created the body alchemy method. Can you tell us a bit more about what that is and what inspired you to develop it?
Sure. Yeah, so when I left wrestling, I had a lot of emotional and physical pain. And for many years, I attributed a lot of my physical pain to the time I spent in the ring. Like, you know, it was a really hard life. Like, it's not normal to take that many bumps, and, you know, for a human body and stuff. Um, but so about the time I hit 30, when I left WWE, I was 27. I had gotten married. I had gone through like a really toxic marriage divorce situation. And About the time I was 30, I was just really struggling. It was like another part of my life where it was like a new point in my life, a new turning point to evolve, to become something different, to heal from things that had transpired. And I was just like experiencing, I didn't feel meaning and purpose in my business. I was running into the same painful relationship dynamics. I was struggling with my health. I was struggling with my identity. And I say this like I'm the queen of reinvention. Like I've reinvented myself so many times, and I think that's a really beautiful thing, to always evolve. And when I hit 30, I'm 38 now, it was like a very, very significant moment in time for me to make a choice to really heal a lot of these things that were created or accentuated or brought to life during that time when I was with WWE, and things from before that in my childhood, all the things that we go through growing up, the way that we are taught directly and indirectly to see the world, to interact with people, how we see ourselves, how we value ourselves. And so when I hit 30, it was this moment to evaluate all of it, and just to say, like, let me look at all this stuff. I keep having these emotional problems. I keep having these issues in my life, and I wanted to stop running from them. I wanted to just handle it. And so I started opening my mind to the idea that I could improve myself, that I could heal parts of myself, that just because I'm admitting or recognizing that there's some things that need work, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't, it doesn't label me as this or this, or damaged or bad or broken. So I started opening my mind more to that, and I started educating myself and listening to books that were resonating, and reading and learning about different ideologies and philosophies and cultures and ideas. And so I started to really unravel all of this mess that kind of happened in the first portion of my life. And I think that's really most people's life path, is like you go through a lot of things that show you who you are and that damage you in ways, and then you get an opportunity to look at it all, to heal it all, to transmute it all, to alchemize it all into who you really want to be in the world. And I was really at that point. I was at that precipice. And so, a couple of years into my healing journey, I had started to learn to meditate and, just holistic things that were really helping me. I dove deeper into health, and I started looking at fitness in a different way, and starting to change my relationship with the gym and fitness and health, and what that really means, and what it really means to be healthy, to be able to move your body without pain, to be able to and to also consider emotional health a part of fitness, and mental health a part of fitness. And I was really finding a lot of amazing things about life that I'd never experienced before. I was opening my mind, I was opening my eyes, opening my heart. And then I learned a movement system a few years ago based on fascia. So your fascia is the connective tissue that covers every muscle, bone, organ, like, it runs from your head to your toe in different directions, spirals. But it's so intricate and it's so important. And what I learned is that your fascia, or your connective tissue, it holds onto traumatic things that happen to you, not just physically, but emotionally. And I was carrying so much emotional pain, and some physical pain. And so I was constantly and chronically in pain. And so I learned this movement system. I learned how to completely transform my posture, how to open up my connective tissue to really liberate myself from all these things that had been living in my body for so long. And it absolutely transformed my life, transform my body. I've always been, like a fitness person, or in shape, but it took me to the next level of health. It started to help me really see the bigger picture in terms of like what health really is. And then I took that movement system, which transformed my life and everything that I had really learned in those in all of my 30s, and I created a methodology for life transformation, which is the body alchemy method. So it's more than a movement system. It's more than different ways to different holistic practices. It's really an ideology. It's a way to see the world. It's a way to interpret yourself, and it's at the highest level, it's an understanding that the things that perhaps you've always accepted as this is the way things are, they don't have to be that way. You can always transform. You can always alchemize your pain and your problems into personal power. And that's I was really drawn to the concept of alchemy, and that's where the name came from. And that's actually the process that happens. You transmute what can be considered negative or heavy or dull into power, into gold, into something shiny. And I feel like that really is my story. So it's a method for life transformation. I coach people privately in groups. I work with corporate teams, and it's more than just a methodology or a career. It's really the way that I live, and it's the way that I carry myself through the world. And it is what I speak on in most contexts. And it's really just become a way of life and a way of being. And it has, I've mentioned I'm 38. I'm 38 now. Every single part of my story as an adult, and also as a kid, but in my adult years, I felt have been leading me to this, have really been leading me to this body of work, to really be doing what fulfills me in the world as my career and really as my identity. So it's a very full circle thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following it on Instagram and seeing everything that you do, and it looks fantastic. You can clearly see the benefits of it. So yeah, it just looks amazing. I'm conscious of time. Obviously, you've given us so much time, so thank you so much. Before we let you go, I'm just curious, can you just let everybody know how they can obviously keep up to date with you and what you're going on, and also what have you got coming up in the kind of future? What are your kind of goals for BAM going forward?
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So everything that I am doing is really on Instagram. Like that's the main platform that I use. And I have like a link in bio store for all the things that I offer, any events that I'm doing. I do most of my stuff virtually. And anything that comes up, I do share on my Instagram, and it's my name, Celeste Bonin. Pretty simple. But if you're interested in, for anybody that's listening, if you're interested in anything I'm talking about, or if any of this resonates, follow me, tune in, join in on the conversation, because this is not just about like a certain type of person or somebody who was in the WWE, and it's something for everybody. There's most people that resonate with my message find a piece in themselves within the things that I talk about, because it's all very real human life stuff that we move through and find solutions for. So yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I'm quite a bit of the time doing Q&As on my stories. And then also, if you just want to go straight to my website, it's shinewithceleste.com, and that has more about my work and the body alchemy method.
Amazing. Celeste, thank you so much for taking the time. Absolute pleasure. Can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Got to tell my story in a cool way. I love some of the questions that you asked that have never really been positioned that way. So I enjoyed myself. So thank you for the chat.